It's interesting because Donald Trump, he's taking credit for this and that the markets are anticipating he's going to get back in power. He doesn't say that when we have a down day in the markets, or maybe it's a different poll that's shown something.
The Fox propaganda network is reluctantly reporting on the staggering success of the stock market under President Biden and Vice President Harris, as Donald Trump tries to take credit for it. But one Fox News host in particular actually called Trump out and roasted him on air about his hypocrisy, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, as you know, one of my favorite things to do is to react to the Fox propaganda network reluctantly reporting on positive economic news under the Biden-Harris economy. Now, I should say that most of them, when they do cover it, do so reluctantly and go out of their way to avoid giving credit to President Biden and Vice President Harris, which is a staggering contrast to how they reported such news when Donald Trump was president, okay? But here's Maria Bartiromo, a top Trump sympathizer at Fox, reporting on the latest record-breaking day of the stock market.
We're in record territory. The Dow and the S&P 500 closing in uncharted territory yesterday, with the Dow seeing its 31st record close of the year at 42,208 at 4 o'clock on Wall Street. That was up 83 points. The S&P 500 recording its 41st record close of the year, sitting at 5732 right now on the S&P. That's up 15 yesterday. And the Nasdaq was up 100 points at 4 o'clock on Wall Street. Now
very impressive stuff. Now, how much does the president of the United States influence the stock market? That's perfectly debatable. I'm perfectly content to say that the president of the United States, Republican or Democrat, has very little directly to do with stock market performance. But that's not the standard that Fox has when a Republican is in charge. When a Republican's in charge and the stock market does well, there's a direct correlation between the stock market and the president's policies. They are eminently creditable for the stock market performance. But when a Democrat's in office, well, then the calculus changes, and then the importance of the stock market falls precipitously. So the way it works is when a Republican's in charge, this is according to Fox, when a Republican's in charge and the stock market does well, you give the Republicans credit. When a Republican's in charge and the stock market does not do well, it's probably because of the Democrats, or, really the stock market's not that important. Then when a Democrat's in charge and the stock market does well, again, either the stock market's really not that big of a deal, or it's probably because the markets anticipate the return of a Republican challenger. So it's kind of really, to the extent that it's good, it's really the Republicans who are responsible for it. And then, of course, if the stock market does poorly under a Democratic president, well, then it's 100% that Democrats' fault, and the stock market becomes really important. You understand that grid of accountability? Well, credit where it's due. One Fox News host has never fallen into that trap, and that is Neil Cavuto, who is a Fox News host and a host on the Fox Business Channel. And he has repeatedly called out this asymmetry, this hypocrisy, this double standard, because after this record-breaking performance in the stock market, Donald Trump tried to take credit and say, it's really because the market is predicting my return to the White House. And Neil Cavuto had a couple of things to say about that.
It's interesting because Donald Trump, he's taking credit for this and that the markets are anticipating he's going to get back in power. He doesn't say that when we have a down day in the markets, or maybe it's a different poll that's shown something. And I get that, and both sides get that.
And even his guest had to laugh about it too. Again, the asymmetry there. When the stock market does well when Trump is in or out of office, it's all because of him. When the stock market does poorly when he's in or out of office, it's always the other person's fault. Pretty pathetic, shameless, cynical stuff that, by the way, Fox has tried to signal boost. Maria Bartiromo, Larry Kudlow, another Fox host who actually served Donald Trump as an economic advisor in the White House, again, very shamelessly. This is not the first time that Neil Cavuto has called that out and been very frustrated with the asymmetry and the hypocrisy. Here's another clip from back in August when Trump tried to do the same thing after yet another record-breaking stock market performance.
Mike, I know, and you do not politicize these things, but the Donald Trump thing in the market amazes me. When they're up, it's all because of him and looking forward to him. When they're down, it's all because the Democrats and how horrific they are. Yet some of our biggest point fall-offs, 3 of the biggest of the top 10, occurred during his administration. Now, a lot of those were in the COVID years. I get that. But, you either own the markets or you don't. It does confuse me, but thank you.
And it should confuse you. I mean, actually, the real answer is not that confusing really at all. It's just the fact of the matter that Republicans are not particularly principled. They're just really not. Again, the grid comes down to what is politically convenient. And unfortunately, too many of Neil Cavuto's colleagues at the Vox Propaganda Network are particularly inclined to indulge that. And I should say that when Trump debated President Biden and competed and campaigned against President Biden in 2020, it was Trump's position that if Biden won the presidency, that there would be an economic crash, the likes of which you've never seen. It would be like the Great Depression. But that never happened. NBC actually did a write-up on this within the past few days. Apocalypse delayed. Trump keeps promising a doom that never comes. Trump predicted that if Biden won, the economy would crash, crime would soar, and Christmas would be canceled. None of that happened, but he's reusing those claims anyway. If the election doesn't go his way, the economy will tank, Christmas will be canceled, and the America as we know it will be, quote, finished, end quote. Donald Trump promised in the run-up to the 2020 election. The race did not go his way, of course, and none of Trump's prophesied cataclysms materialized under President Biden's presidency. But that has not stopped Trump from recycling some of the same dark portents about Kamala Harris' presidency. Quote, if he's elected, the stock market will crash, Trump said in October 2020 during his only debate with Biden. Quote, if he gets in, you'll have a depression the likes of which you've never seen. The depression never happened. Stocks rose during Biden's presidency. But Trump recently predicted that a Harris victory would lead to, quote, a massive stock market downturn and a, quote, 1929-style depression. In 2020, he said in a tweet, this election is a choice between a Trump recovery or a Biden depression. In 2024, he said on Truth Social, voters have a choice, Trump prosperity or the Kamala crash and Great Depression of 2024. Predicting the future is inherently difficult, and bluster about the danger of the other side winning is the norm for politicians of all stripes. But Trump's penchant for hyperbole, overconfidence, and black and white claims has made him a particularly inaccurate Nostradamus. The Trump campaign did not respond to a request for comment for this article. Quote, if Joe Biden ever became president, Trump tweeted in 2020, our country would collapse. Quote, if I don't win, he told New Hampshire voters in 2024, I think our country is finished. 4 years ago, he warned Michigan voters that, quote, a vote for Biden is a vote to completely eradicate your auto industry. On Wednesday, he warned Michigan voters, quote, if I don't win, you will have no auto industry within 2 to 3 years. It will be all gone. Trump's prognostications about life under a Biden presidency grew more and more apocalyptic as Election Day drew nigh in 2020. With the COVID pandemic raging, Trump told supporters that Biden had plans to, quote, impose a blanket shutdown and, quote, across the country and keep the country locked down to fulfill his, quote, plan to kill the American dream, end quote. If you vote for Biden, it means no kids in school, no graduations, no weddings, no Thanksgiving, no Christmas, and no 4th of July together, he said at a rally in Goodyear, Arizona. If he comes in, he said at a Nevada rally, the Christmas season will be canceled. Of course, Biden imposed no such lockdowns, and holiday season shopping rose every year of Biden's presidency to a record high last year, according to the National Retail Federation. In his speech at the Republican National Convention in 2020, Trump called Biden a, quote, Trojan horse for socialism who would, quote, give free rein to violent anarchists to, quote, completely dismantle and destroy the American way of life. And it goes on like this. It goes on to talk about crime, how crime has fallen, and how President Biden has signed legislation increasing police funding, which is the American Rescue Plan, that, by the way, every Republican opposed. The reason I bring this up is it's part and parcel of what Trump does. He predicts all these things. He tries to take credit for the good things that happen, even when he has tangibly nothing to do with them. And he's aided and abetted pretty much every step of the way, not just by Republican politicians and Republican voters, but certainly elements of the Republican media. But again, his prophecy record is atrocious. The last thing I'll point out is that despite all of this, I mean, Trump says he's so damn good for the markets, but one has to ask, why is his Trump media shares? Why are his Trump media shares, the stock market performance of his media company, continuing to plummet, continuing to free fall? How does that make any sense? How could it possibly be that Trump is so damn good for the markets that he has this outsized influence, positive influence on the market, and yet his company continues to plummet? There is no way that these two ideas can exist simultaneously. The real answer, of course, is that Donald Trump has very little control, very little influence on the stock market, particularly when he's not president of the United States, which he is not. And as for why Trump media shares are crashing, perhaps it's a poorly managed company that isn't particularly attractive to people. And after that initial hype, oh my God, a former president, potential future president, starting his own media company and getting the surge of support from right-wing, shareholders, maybe that lost its luster very rapidly. Seems to be the case. But it won't stop Trump because, of course, Trump has no relationship with consistency, right? He is not beholden to consistency or internal logic or things he said in the past. And certainly he's not going to be fact-checked with any degree of relentlessness by right-wing media. They may occasionally say, this seems to contradict, but they're not going to hold his feet to the fire. And so he's just given a license to lie and, catastrophize with impunity and not be held to any sort of record. But here at Pondering Politics, we love to point out when Donald Trump gets it wrong, which is almost always. We love to point out when the Fox Propaganda Network is reluctantly forced to try to report on the economic success of the Biden-Harris administration and the economy under the Biden-Harris administration. And it's great when the occasional Fox News host like Neil Cavuto calls Trump out for his hypocrisy, his double standards, and his terrible record of predictions. Great stuff. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.